Hi, this is Nahid, and this is a recorded overview of the call that we had on people issues on Friday, January 25th, 2019. Now, for this class, I did not have any advance notice about what anyone wanted to talk about. And so one thing that you should know if you're in the Aspire group is that I'm going to be sending out email saying, what's going on? Do you have any people issues that are bothering you that you'd like to discuss on the call? And if you respond to that email, then I can actually create a class in advance with a topic and great PowerPoint slides and all of that. But if nobody responds to that, then I'm going to do sort of an impromptu thing, which is what we did in this class, and that is in our round robin, whoever happens to be on the call, I'll ask a few questions. And the ones that we asked for this call was for everyone to think of somebody who's been difficult for them to work with or live with recently, to think about maybe how they're reacting to each other, what they think is the underlying pattern, and why it's important to improve that relationship. And then based on that, we had a discussion. Now, we actually had an awesome discussion in our class, but I knew that I was going to forget about it as soon as I got off. And of course, I can't record it because it's people talking. But what I did ask everybody at the end is let's write a list of the things that we think people would want to know about who aren't able to be in the class and who are only listening to the recording. And so we wrote down 7 things. And what I'm going to do today is go over each of those 7 things and tell you what I remember about our discussion. So the first thing is ability to be aware of how your own reaction is playing into the issues. My reaction, my story, own it. So what that reminds me of is that no matter what the issue is, if you're having somebody that is very difficult for you to deal with, even if 80% of the reason that they're difficult for you to deal with is them, or even if it seems like 99% or 100% is them, if you're feeling drained or having a tough time with their behavior, then part of the equation resides inside of you. And it's really important for you to be aware of that part of it, because that part of it, even if it's only a few percentage points of a dynamic, is where you have the control to make a change, and you can make a change. Typically, if someone is behaving in a really difficult way and you're having a hard time dealing with them, the degree to which you're feeling guilty or angry or frustrated or upset with them is directly related to your reaction and your story. So being aware of your reaction and your story is really, really important. Number 2 here says, then to be able to separate yourself and have compassion and insight into what they might be experiencing in their reaction. So typically, when people are hard to deal with, it's because they're reacting to something and their behavior is coming across as really immature. So they're yelling, or they're being difficult, or they're sulking, or they're making snarky comments, or they're in some way behaving in a way that makes it very difficult for you to interact with them. Well, if they're behaving in that way, they're having some kind of an internal reaction. Even if it's a consistent behavior pattern, they could be always in reaction. They could be living in a story that puts them into reaction, and they could be constantly triggered. Most of us, before we've done our own personal development work, have been constantly triggered without realizing it. So once you are aware of your own reaction and you can separate yourself from the situation, their behavior stops bothering you, and then you can look at their behavior for what it is, which is a reaction. And that makes it easier for you to have compassion for them and to begin to think about what it's like in their shoes. And what I did in our call is I actually asked the people that had difficult people or examples to tell me what they thought the person might be experiencing. And so they put themselves in the person's shoes and they shared what they thought they might be thinking, what they thought they might be feeling. And I found that enormously helpful. People tended to shift right away just by putting themselves in the shoes of the other person's reaction. Number 3, I get to decide for myself what is enough. Now, this was very specifically related to one issue where someone found that they were feeling guilty about how much they were giving. But the reason we brought it up as a point here to be on the recording is because we realized together in our discussion that this comes up a lot for a lot of us in situations where we want to be a good friend, or we want to be a good parent, or we want to be a good child if we have an elderly parent. When we're in a relationship with someone who needs a lot from us and we want to be very giving. And what happens is when you think about all the things you could be giving, often there's way more. There's kind of an infinite amount that you could give. So, for example, if you have a friend that's going through cancer and you want to be supportive, I mean, you could be there at their side day and night, 24 hours a day, and there are probably still other things you could think of that you could be doing for them. So the question is, what is enough? And that answer has to lie within you. In other words, no matter what other people say or do, when you get clear for yourself on what's enough, for example, I have an elderly parent, and if I call that parent once a week or twice a week and I talk to them for 15 minutes, that's good. Then you won't feel guilty anymore. And then you'll stop being bothered by other people insinuating that you aren't doing enough or complaining. So that was a really important point, that I get to decide for myself what is enough giving in various types of relationships. So how many nights do I spend quality time with my kids, right? How much time is good? So you have to go through that introspection, and everyone's got to come up with your own decision, but you do have to contain your giving, and you have to decide where the edges of that container are. If you won't do that and you decide it's infinite, then you will always be drained by other people. Number 4, my relationship with myself is most important, / self-compassion. That was really important because most people realized that the source of their angst was their own self-judgment, and that a lot of times when we get upset and it feels like it's because of what someone else is doing, it's really because what we're telling ourselves about what it means about us. So I had to stop the recording for a moment because I had a little cough. So if you heard a little hic there, that was me shutting the recording off and turning it back on. But we're back. Number 5 here, be very clear that when you see someone in reaction, it's about them feeling overwhelmed with emotion and out of control. So even though their behavior will seem immature, if you let it trigger you, that just adds fuel to the fire. And then number 6 here is the same as number 3. Knowing what is enough will help you drop the guilt. And number 7 is similar to number 5. So I'm going to read number 7 and then I'm going to talk about it. When you listen to someone rant, it can be uncomfortable, but they can't hear the facts at the time. So when they're emotional, soothe them. When they're calm, teach them. A lot of times it's hard to deal with other people because they are in reaction mode. They're reacting to something. And when people are reacting to someone, they're not able to respond to logic at all. So typically what we'll find is someone's saying things that make no sense, and our first response is, well, that doesn't make any sense. This is blah, blah, blah. And we want to give them facts. But what actually soothes them is helping them get out of whatever their particular panic reaction is. And on the example that we had in the class, our best guess of that person's panic reaction by putting ourselves in the person's shoes was that they were feeling like their life was out of control, they weren't going to be able to get to everything, and so they started complaining. And what I shared is a technique that I use when people are really emotional. And it's really not trying to respond to them logically, but trying to understand what they're afraid of and reassure that. And typically it's people feeling like they're out of control. So I might say things like, you've got this. Or I might give them information that helps them realize that they actually will be able to get through this. Like, you know, I've seen you get through this kind of thing before. You've done X and Y and Z, and I've seen you do those things, and this W here is about the same, and I'm right here with you. It's one step at a time. You can handle this. I believe in you, that type of thing. And it makes a huge, huge difference because people need to calm down first and then they can be logical. So everyone was joking that this would be a great quote, and that is, when they're emotional, soothe them. When they're calm, teach them. So you wait until they calm down and get out of the reaction before you go into actual logical problem-solving mode. So that's about all I can share with you about our discussion, but I can tell you it was a wonderful discussion. And pretty much every time that we do this people issues class, I'm going to ask you, bring people issues. And even if you can't be on the class live, feel free to send a description of your people issue via email, and I'll include the issue and, the solution or maybe some insights on it on the recording, so you'll still be able to get a benefit even if you can't come to the class live. This is a rich place. We're going to be talking about boundaries. We're going to be talking about spouse relationships. We're going to be talking about relationships with your boss, relationships with people that are just horrible and very immature and difficult to deal with, but you have to deal with them because maybe they're your client or they're someone that you have to work with in your work environment. I think this is going to be an awesome class, and I would love to have everybody participate. So thanks for listening to the recording, and if you can't be on the call live, then make sure to send me some issues, and I'll incorporate them into the next class.